especially if we're designing these different systems and technologies and interfaces and everything around us with intention, we can be much more inclusive and honest about the ways that the world should interact with us. So, to me, creative careers are really the foundation of so much of the world.
Wolfpack fans, today we are talking about what it actually takes to turn a daydream into a day job with Angela Martin. Hi, Angela.
Hello.
I'm so glad you're here. I can't wait to get into this. Angela has built a creative and technical career rooted in accessibility, inclusive design, and human-centered work, and she's deeply honest about the mindset and systems that make that possible. Angela Martin's design journey started in middle school, experimenting with graphic design on a ThinkPad. That dates you a second. We were just talking about that. Today, she's an advisory UX designer at Lenovo, shaping inclusive digital experiences for more than 44 million users each month. Outside of Lenovo, she co-founded Design Storming to help creatives build sustainable careers. And she's the author of This Is Not a Dream, From Daydream to Day Job, a guide that turns ambition into practical action. And today, we will get into the notion that creative careers are possible, and they require clarity, structure, and intentional skill building, not just talent or passion. What an impressive intro for you.
Thank you. It's a little wild to see so many years of work and processes and habits sort of summarized in a paragraph. It's been a wild ride. I'm just so grateful to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, welcome, welcome. Tell our listeners a little bit more about why you want to talk on this podcast about your book, and how did you write a book? That's incredible.
Well, I've been a mentor for almost 10 years now, which is a little silly when you find out how old I am. But I've been really grateful to have been trusted by so many students just across their lives and their journeys. And I realized very quickly that many of these students were asking the same questions. And I was repeating some of the answers. I've been refining these answers as the world has really changed, especially post-pandemic, how the world really treats creative careers and the possibilities that it's really unlocked. And so I finally just one day wrote it all down, sat down, realized what questions were the most common, and did my homework to make sure I was giving the best guidance possible. And I just want to democratize access to that.
I love that all of these students sought you out, Angela. They just wanted your advice, and you were like, well, I might as well go ahead and just make sure that I have all this documented, and not just the people that I know get access to it. What is a creative career?
It's a great question. So creative careers, it's not just things like painting or creative writing or graphic design, but all of those are very helpful and wonderful for our world. It can also be things like user experience design, which is what I do at Lenovo UX. So if you think about an app or a system, someone had to decide where all of the buttons go, what they say, what colors they are, and what happens when you press them. So much of our world is more designed than we may even realize. The chair that you sit in, the door that you open, someone had to design the way that we interact with these things. And to me, creative careers just have so much to offer the world, especially if we're designing these different systems and technologies and interfaces and everything around us with intention. We can be much more inclusive and honest about the ways that the world should interact with us. So to me, creative careers are really the foundation of so much of the world.
I never thought about all the things that go into everything that you experience. Like you said, a UX designer is picking what color buttons and where they go. How do you train for a job like that? Did you know you wanted to be this when you grew up?
Definitely not. So, user experience design is a relatively new field. So, when people ask me, what is your degree in? A lot of people are expecting me to say something like graphic design or maybe even psychology. And so, when I actually say that I hold a Bachelor of Fine Arts in user experience design, I get a lot of, no, what's on your degree? Well, actually, it is UX. So, it's a very new program. I'm very lucky to have caught it at the sort of rising tide of it. And ultimately, since this didn't really exist before in the way that it does now, I knew that I loved art and technology. I was really standing at the center of that intersection between where creativity could really be fueled by tech Growing up disabled myself, I am severely dyslexic. I actually learned how to read on a Lenovo ThinkPad. And that whole experience unlocked so much for me. So that ThinkPad that I had came with Photoshop back in the day, and I just started playing around with it. And by sixth grade, I won my first national graphic design competition. And that really kicked off the information architecture, thinking about how people view design, understanding audiences. That was really the start of my journey for that. And that sort of naturally became UX over the course of my career.
I'm impressed by all of the things you just said, and also just your vulnerability of sharing your disability and how you have been able to propel and be so successful in dealing with dyslexia. Did that also fuel your passion in this area?
Absolutely. So, growing up, my father is a disabled combat veteran, and my mother is an ER nurse. So, seeing how lives can shift really quickly really impacted me. Also, growing up, one of my very best friends is um, legally deaf. And so, understanding how the world has not adapted for people with disabilities really frustrated me. I have a deep passion for justice, and I thought that the world should be more not only not only accommodating, but also deeply inclusive, and how we could change the ways that we're designing these things to be that from the get-go has always inspired me. So absolutely, growing up, that mindset was instilled in me pretty early.
And that's a huge part of who you are, where you grew up, what you experienced, what you observed. And you said, I can make some changes to that. And here you have. Let's kind of talk a little bit about that accessibility piece. So do you use that now in your UX design, and also in you have your side gig where you do your design consulting? Share a little more about the accessibility involved there.
Absolutely. So, accessibility in design looks at a number of different things. It's not only how users are able to interact with something. So, for example, if you were born with one hand, can you still interact with the application or the product I've put in front of you? Well, what if you're blind or low vision or even colorblind? All of these different scenarios are things that we can design for using best practices. So, me being a digital designer, something I reference quite a bit is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG. It outlines a number of different legal requirements or suggested guidelines for making your applications digitally accessible. And that includes things like how far apart should your icons be? What size text should you have? What colors should you use or not use? And these things are really great guidelines, but that checklist is a compliance floor. I would really like to see more of our products and culture really strive for the ceiling of that version instead of just bare minimum compliance.
And there's so many different situations that people are dealing with in their life. We don't always know it. Like if you didn't share with me you had that disability, it wasn't something I could look at and see. You know, like there's a seeing eye dog next to you, and so I might think that you are visually impaired. How many people are we talking about that are dealing with this situation where they might go on a website and not be able to get the information?
Absolutely. That's a really great question. And unfortunately, the number is bigger than we probably realize. So there is a number of different organizations doing research to find out how inaccessible is the web really. And what we found is the number changes really dramatically by the definition of disability. Just as you shared, some disabilities are invisible, where other disabilities are more clear. So, evaluating the accessibility of a website for people with dyslexia, for example, is pretty hard to understand because most people with dyslexia can usually get around it unless it's particularly severe, when maybe a different font choice could have really impacted their ability to navigate a website. So, the number is pretty hard to quantify, but what we do know is that over 1 billion people worldwide experience disabilities every day. And the reality of it is that we are all only temporarily abled. So either you might be born with a permanent disability, you might be born blind or low vision, or what have you. We might also have a temporary disability. So you might fall and break your arm. You're going to get better, but for that time that you're in the cast, you are temporarily disabled. We also have situational disabilities. So if you've ever used your phone outside in the sun and you get that screen glare, or maybe you're holding some groceries and you get a phone call, That's a situational disability. We
Hmm.
also have progressive disabilities. And this is actually kind of an exciting space because as we're living longer and as we are getting to experience aging, more and more of us are going to get progressive disabilities. Things like just muscular atrophy, things like Alzheimer's or dementia. We're designing for ourselves tomorrow, today, whether we realize it or not.
I think that's a really important way to look at it because it hits home with every person. It's not like, oh, well, that's just a small number of people. You're talking about in the billion with the B at the beginning of it. Why do you think it is important that accessibility is coming up in every conversation for design?
A number of different reasons. When we think about the disability community, it's not only just the right thing to do for us to include accessibility, it's also the smart business move. So, if over a billion people have some form of disability, if they can't use your product, they can't buy it or they won't buy it. So, that's a lot of money that we're talking about. And the other great thing about a lot of what the world is shifting into is we also have laws like the European Accessibility Act, which just passed in last June, which really standardized a lot of these different guidelines. So it took into effect just this past summer and included that every product that is sold in the European Union now has to comply with guidelines like the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. That was included in the US in Section 508 and a number of other references in actual legal systems, but that's really globalized a lot of the accessibility standardizations. So we are seeing that there are a number of different cases for making sure that your products are truly diversely accessible.
What's the best example you can think of a product that really has that at the heart of the way it's designed?
I think we could name just about anything from Lenovo, and I don't say that just because I work here. One of my favorite things about working at Lenovo is that our mantra is smarter technology for all. And that's not just a catchphrase. It's not just something that we have on our walls or in our logo. It is really the heart of our technology. And we put our money where our mouth is. So, for example, one of my sister teams is the Inclusive Product Design Office, or the IPDO, and they are ensuring that all of our products and technologies are going out the door with some sort of usability testing for people with disabilities, if it's especially if it's a high-risk technology, something like wearables or new interfaces, or some of our very cool innovation products that Lenovo makes. We are making sure that they are being actually tested with people with disabilities. And so, one of the ways that we do that is that we invite the Governor Moorhead School for the Blind right here in North Carolina to come to our campus every year. And they're actually coming just this week. And we give them real products to test and we get their feedback. And then we go and we make those updates. So, they were visiting our campus and we heard from them that it was hard for them to find the power button because it was the same shape and size as a lot of the other buttons. So we moved the power button. We made it into a different shape. It's now very clearly something that stands apart from the rest of the keyboard. We also heard from them that the volume up and volume down buttons were difficult to find, and a number of other keyboards that we had were meeting the minimums because they had the tactile markings on some of the standard keys, but Lenovo went above and beyond to add additional tactile markings across the keyboard. So if you're sighted, you might not ever notice them, but if you're blind or low vision, that might be how you navigate our keyboards. So not only do we listen to people with disabilities, we invite them into the conversation, and we co-design for them and then test again. So it really is the heart of Lenovo's process and innovation design.
And as students who are listening are thinking about maybe the company they want to work for, I know you mentioned that you oversee an internship program, and maybe you can mention a little bit about that for some of our listeners who might like to be a candidate for that. And also, as they are just embarking on the start of their career, advice you would give to them as they're thinking about designing things in the future.
So Lenovo hosts the Lux internship program, the Lenovo User Experience Design Intern Program. And we are really looking at interns who are hoping to have hands-on experience designing these products and technologies from both hardware, software, research, all of the engineering process that goes into a product design, we are looking to have on board. In our second year of this program, I am so excited that we are going global. So not only are we going to have 3 local interns to North Carolina, but we're also going to have at least 1 intern over in Beijing, China. This is really important to us because Lenovo's headquarters in Beijing, and so having this global team is really going to show the interns what it's like to actually work like this in a real company. And some of the skills that we are looking for is at the intersection of that hardware and software. Lenovo's a PC company. We make laptops, but we also make software. And so how those two things interact with one another is really important to us. For our UXD team specifically, the career advice that I would give is that our mantra is that we are data-driven and customer-centric. And so what we like to look for in an internship application, for example, is how are you making design-driven decisions based on an actual user or an interaction that you have had that really showcases a need or a desire and your ability to understand that and then design something for that end user. So that's really what we're looking for.
That sounds like a fantastic opportunity. And are there any specific majors, or it can be any background?
Any background is fantastic. Just because user experience design is so new, we really do have a wide array of folks applying. So anything from graphic design to psychology to industrial design to engineering, anybody who is working at this intersection of art, design, technology, and user-centered design is really somebody we're looking for.
And I'm looking at how fast our time has gone, and I'm realizing that I'm going to ask you a wrap-up question on accessibility, but I think you need to come back next week so we can talk some more about your books. We haven't gotten to it yet.
I would love that.
Okay, so as we wrap up on accessibility, any final words for someone who's maybe never even thought about this in their daily life that you would want them to remember?
Absolutely. So a big mantra for us in the community is progress over perfection. We know that there is a lot to get right about accessibility, that the community is far and wide. And what you can do today is just one little thing. You can go home and you can make sure that your designs are color contrast accessible. And what I mean by that is making sure that your text or your buttons or your input has high enough contrast in terms of color with its background. So black and white, perfect. That's very high contrast. Light gray on a light gray might not be visible for somebody who's colorblind. So that's just one thing you can check using webaim.org. They're a fantastic organization that has a color contrast checker. You can also just start using dyslexic-friendly fonts, so things like Arial or Calibri. We're going to avoid things like Century Gothic, anything that's too tall or too skinny, or where the letters look the same. So that might be the A and the E, the O and the C, the D's and the B's, the L's and the T's. These are all really important considerations. So those are just 2 simple things you can go home and try out. And if you're looking for something more advanced, webaim.org also has a number of different accessibility considerations that you can start testing out.
Wow, Angela, that's a lot. I didn't know any of that. Maybe we should just eliminate these fonts that are not accessible, not even give them an option. Maybe that'll be something in the future. We will link up to the websites that you mentioned in our show notes, and we will see you next week to talk about this book.
Awesome. Thanks so much.